Hey everyone, my name is Alexandra and I am a watercolor artist. One of the things that I find is so key to learn for watercolor, especially as beginners, is color theory. So today I want to show you guys how to paint a color chart. Here is an example of my lovely color chart. I use these all the time, especially if I'm struggling to figure out how to mix certain colors or just make something specific. Color charts are super helpful to help you pinpoint what to mix to get the color that you want. Often as you become more familiar with your palette, you may not need to use it as much, but I find that they're really handy, especially when you're starting out. In general, if you guys want more content on color theory, feel free to go and check out my playlist on my YouTube channel, Color Theory for Beginners, or see my website to pre-order my course, From Palette to Paper, A Beginner's Guide to Watercolor. Let's get started. For supplies today, you guys will need 2 cups of water. I have one for clean, one for dirty water. I have some tape where, as you can see, I've taped my paper off. If you guys don't have tape, that's totally fine. You can use a pencil instead. I'm using a Princeton number 8 paintbrush, but again, whatever size you guys have is okay. The main thing for this one is that you guys take some of the main paint colors that you use, and we're just going to be mixing those into our color chart. So just for reference, so you know what I have, I'm using Permanent Rose, Quinacridone Gold, Oxide of Chromium, Pthalo Turquoise, and Permanent Mauve. Last thing I have is my paper. For this tutorial, I'm using 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. The first thing that I did to get ready to create my color chart is tape off my paper. So as you can see, I did it with my example here. So this is actually all of the Winsor Newton paints that I have. I wanted to have just a nice combination so that I can see what colors I'm using. So for our practice that we're going to do, what I want you guys to do is pick however many colors you are going to paint with. I've chosen 5 different colors for our purposes today. And what we want is to create a column for each of these colors of paint. So I have 5 squares going across and 5 squares going down. That is sort of at the center. Now, as you guys can see, I have extra squares going on along the edges just to confuse you. I am going to attach a drawing guide for your color chart just so that it's less confusing. So if you guys are not sure exactly how to create this, then feel free to reference the PDF link below, and that'll help you for where to start. But I've done these extra columns, and the reason for that is so that I can paint the color on its own without mixing it with anything in those columns specifically. So now that our paper is all taped, one more thing, you guys don't have to do this, but I'm actually gonna draw a line just going down diagonally down the center. I just grabbed a piece of paper that I had, and I'm gonna use that as my ruler to draw this line. I didn't quite do my squares super even. If you guys want to use a ruler all the way through, it makes it definitely easier. But I will show you guys what this line is for specifically as we go. I'm just gonna erase it to make it a little bit lighter, just so that it doesn't stand out too much once we start painting. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're gonna go in with our first color of paint. So the first one that I have here is my Permanent Rose. So I'm just gonna get my paintbrush nice and wet, and I'm gonna go into my palette, make sure that my color is nice and saturated. And I'm going to paint into this little top square that I had here. And in this one, I want to make sure that I get a nice vibrant color. So the reason tape is kind of nice is because you can just paint over it. You don't have to be too particular about the lines. Often if I draw this out with pencil instead, then I'll be very careful to paint inside the squares. So I've painted my first square in, and now the second thing that I want to do is paint the same color right down here. So what we're imagining is that these same colors that go across this top line are also going down across the left side. But I want to show a different value of that color, so I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to paint it a lot more watered down. So we're just going to get the nice light pink color in there. And now that I've done that, I'm going to go in and I'm going to paint in that first square of color. So I'm just going to paint it lighter for now, and then you'll see why I added the diagonal line in just a minute. But now that I've done that with that same amount of color, I'm actually going to go all the way down my page. So doing sort of watered down pink, we're going to paint in all the squares all the way down our page. Now, just for context, because you end up painting sort of the same color mixes on two sides of your page, I drew the diagonal line so that we could focus on one side being those really nice light versions of the color, nice and watered down, and then the other side we're going for a more vibrant, more saturated color. So this side was my nice soft light ones. Now I have my pink here. I want to follow it all the way across, but on this side I'm going to go for that more vibrant, more saturated pink color. So going into my paint again, but this time you can see that I'm making sure that it's much more pigmented. And I'm trying to make sure that I have sort of an even consistency all the way across my square. Right, so now that I have those painted in, the first square that I painted is dry now. So now I'm just gonna go over and I want to add in the brighter pink just to one half of it. And you'll see as we go, this just helps us see the difference when you're mixing lighter colors versus darker colors, which is super helpful when you're painting because you're not always painting with the brightest brights or the most pigmented things. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm gonna rinse my paintbrush and just give it an extra little rinse in the clean water. And we're gonna move on to our next color. So next I have the Quinacridone Gold. So I wanna definitely make sure that my paintbrush is nice and clean, otherwise you're gonna already get a mixture of that yellow and gold color. So going into my palette here, I'll start with the more pigmented version and I'm just gonna fill in this top portion. And now I'm gonna water it down just a little bit. And we'll paint in our other yellow square. All right, so now this is where the color mixing gets really fun. We are gonna work our way all the way across from left to right here. but we're just gonna paint right on top of the pink. So if you guys look at different techniques for creating color charts, you'll see that there's different ways. You could either mix directly onto your palette. I'm doing a bit more of a glazing technique to create this color chart. You get generally the same effect on each. I just find that this is a little bit more helpful to make sure that I have the correct ratios of each color that I'm painting. So starting with that little bit more watered down yellow, we're gonna go directly on top of the pink. And then I'm just gonna keep going all the way across. So now I can see this is where my diagonal line is. So beyond this point, I'm gonna switch and I'm gonna paint with a more pigmented, brighter yellow. I find that whenever I get new paints, adding a color chart is such a good thing for me to do because it just helps you be super familiar with the colors that all of your paints have. Okay, so now we're working our way down from this yellow strip up at the top here. But this time I want it to be that softer, more watered down yellow. I'm going all the way down. I had a little bit too much water on that first one, so I'm actually just gonna pick some of it up. Just wanna make sure it's not pooling too much as it dries. Okay, so now that we've done all of those, I am going to paint one half of this one just to make it match with being the more bold and vibrant side. And then the only square that we've missed is this top one right here. So we're going again for that more pigmented yellow, and we are painting directly on top of the pink paint. So already I am loving the color combinations here. You can see what a vibrant sort of orange corally color that creates. All right, and now we just continue the same process. So we're moving on to our oxide of chromium, or our green paint next. And this time I'll start with the more watered down one. So again, even with my more watered down ones, I just want to try to make sure that I'm matching the transparency of the rest that I'm painting on this side. So I want to make sure that one isn't super light while the others are much darker. And now we're just going to work our way across. So I'm going right over top of the pink paint here. All right, so I know that if I keep going this way, I'm heading into the more saturated green colors. So instead, I'm gonna switch gears and I'm gonna work my way down so I can finish painting in the rest of those light, more translucent colors. So I know that my green is gonna be up here, so I will continue to work my way down with that translucent green. I had my tape near something furry, so you can see little hairs on my palette here. That's what that is, though. That's not anything from the paint. Okay, so now let's move on to the less transparent paints. Now this paint in general is less translucent, so I'm gonna make it more bold, but I'm just gonna be careful that it's not blocking the color that's underneath. So I'm gonna paint my bold color here. And then I'm going to continue to do so as I work my way down. All right, so on this one here, I'm just doing half of my square. And now I'm going to continue this row, the horizontal row here. Again, making sure that it's much more vibrant and brighter, but just because of the paint specifically, because it has less light fastness and transparency, I want to make sure that I am also not going too dark with it. And that's not with all my paints. This one specifically tends to go onto my page like that, so I just have to watch that. Right, so next I'm just gonna rinse into my dirty cup first. Now we're moving on to our turquoise paint. All right, so I'll start with the lighter end. And if it's easier for you guys as you're painting, you're more than welcome to paint in the colors across the top and side so you know what your reference is and then go from there. I know for this painting, it's okay, and I kind of laid them out so that I know what I'm adding. But for something like my sample color chart that I have here, because I had so many colors, I had to make sure that I definitely knew which order I was painting the colors in. All right, so now we're switching to a more saturated turquoise. As you paint this, you can see how helpful it would be when you're just doing your regular paintings, because I know sometimes I'm thinking, oh, I want a really vibrant green. I don't have one on my palette, and I want to figure out what I can mix to get that. If I look at my color chart right away, I can see, oh, when I mix the turquoise and the quinacridone gold, I end up with this really beautiful, vibrant green color. Right, now that I know that I'm at the bottom half of my diagonal line, I'm going back to painting that more translucent square. We had not quite enough paint on there, so we're going to add a little bit more color in. All right, so now, oh, I got some water on there. Just take that off. Now we're at our last row, which is our permanent mauve color. And for this one, I'll do the same thing where I'll start with the more transparent color and then we'll go to the more saturated. So as you can see, I am testing on my napkin a lot just to make sure that I have the transparency that I want. and that it kind of matches that of everything else that I've just painted. Because what you'll find if you're not matching those is you don't always get that perfect 50-50 mix of the two colors. So it's a good thing to watch out for. So even with this one, I didn't quite have enough purple because I could see that the yellow is showing through a little bit more than I'd like it. So I'm just gonna add some more in there. Now we'll switch to our more saturated side of our color chart. All right, now that I'm on to my last one, we're just gonna paint that last diagonal line going across the bottom. All right, so now I'm gonna let that all fully dry, and then we're gonna take the tape off, label some things, and we'll be all done. As you guys can see, one of the reasons I love using tape is because peeling it is honestly the most satisfying thing. It does look nice when you draw the squares with pencil as well, but yes, I just love how satisfying it is. So now that it's clear, we don't have our tape on there anymore, I'm just gonna go ahead and label each of the colors. That way I have a reference and I actually know specifically what I used for everything. So I'm just gonna work my way across. I'll start over here with my permanent mauve, and this pen is gonna die, so I am gonna grab another one. All right, we are going to try that again with hopefully a pen that's not dying. Now it is really important to label, because if you don't and you're going through and you're trying to either find or make a specific color, it's really hard if you have, like I do, multiple different blue paints or multiple different purple paints, just to remember which brand I was using and which specific color I was using. All right, so now we're just gonna go through and continue labeling above each of the colors. Now that that's labeled, our color chart is all done. As you guys can see, this is such an incredible reference to have just to see where we're painting. I chose, again, a glazing technique to do this with. If you mix directly on your palette, you won't get as much of mixture of colors showing through. So say this one, for example, you can see parts where more of the yellow is showing through. I honestly don't mind that just because I do a lot of glazing in my paintings. So it's kind of a nice reference for me to know that if I mix those two colors or if I use a glazing technique, I'm sort of going to end up with the same result. Thank you so much for following along. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to Alexandra Victoria Studio. This really helps me as I continue to make tutorials. Also, this tutorial was definitely a little bit more theory-based, so if you have any questions, make sure to leave a comment below, and I'll do my best to either answer in the comments or answer in another video. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys next time.